I'm Emily. I'm the marketing events coordinator at Meetup, and today we are joined by a special guest, Luigi Iacobellis. He is a tech enthusiast, training professional, and YouTube content creator. This event will be a crash course on the tool taking the world by storm. You will learn how to use ChatGPT to write, code, and even brainstorm new ideas. You will hear how the tool differs from other AI helpers on the market and how it is designed to continuously evolve with user interaction. So before we get into it, I'm just going to quickly go over a few guidelines and the agenda. So for today's guidelines, this event is recorded, but don't worry, you will not appear in the video. You can only see myself and Luigi. There's also a mute courtesy, so your audio will be muted throughout the event, but don't worry, we still want to hear your questions, so please put them in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and we will be doing some Q&A at the end of the event. Closed captioning is also available. To turn it on, you can click on the live transcription icon at the bottom of your screen and select your preference from there. And today's agenda, first we're just doing a quick introduction, and then we will hop into the ChatGPT demo with Luigi for 40 minutes, and then we will do a Q&A session at the end for 15 minutes. So before I let Luigi take it away, I'm just gonna give him a quick introduction so you can all get to know him a little bit better. So Luigi is a tech enthusiast, training professional, and part-time YouTuber whose channel provides tech tutorials aimed at making individuals more productive. Luigi's rapidly growing YouTube channel features over 300 tutorials on software applications, not limited to Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, Power Automate, ServiceNow, Airtable, Wix, and more. When Luigi is not creating content, providing training, or working as an IT professional, he is likely spending time with his amazing family. So thank you so much, Luigi, for being here. And this is such an anticipated event. So we are so excited to have you here and to hear all about ChatGPT and how we can incorporate it.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Emily. And thank you to everyone for attending. All right, I'll share my screen here. And Emily, if you can just confirm that you can see it.
Yep, we can see it.
All right, perfect. So we'll get started. So welcome. Oh, sorry, I'll just move my Zoom bar here. Welcome to today's session titled Intro to ChatGPT. As Emily mentioned, my name is Luigi Iacobellis. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I will be facilitating today's session. Before I move on, I did want to take an opportunity to thank the Meetup Live team for having me here today. I also like to thank everyone for attending. My goal for today's session is to make sure that everybody who took time out of their day to show up walks away learning at least one new thing, and hopefully you'll discover some way that you can use ChatGPT to solve a problem or be more productive. Now, in terms of the agenda for the session I'll be facilitating, I've kind of broken this down into two parts. The first part and the really short part is all about context. So we'll start off by talking about what is ChatGPT, how does it work, what makes it special, and what are some limitations with it. And then the second part, which is where we're going to spend the majority of time today, is in a section that I'm calling Show Me the Goods. We're going to look at several different ways that you can use ChatGPT in your day-to-day personal or professional life. Now, what is ChatGPT? And I'm going to provide the most simple explanation that I can. ChatGPT is basically a computer program, sometimes referred to as a chatbot, that is designed to simulate human conversation in written form. Now, it was built by a company called OpenAI, and it was released publicly in November 2022. It's also really important to know that it is free to use, and there is a premium version that was recently launched that provides enhanced performance, access to new features, priority access during peak periods, etc. And that is a paid product. You do have to have a subscription to use the premium version. Now, if this is the first time that you are exploring ChatGPT, then the next couple of slides are really just intended to explain how it works in terms of how users interact with it. And it is very simple. Step one, you go to the website, you log in, and you put a query or a prompt into the ChatGPT user interface. So you're basically asking it a question. Step two, it's going to analyze that response. It's going to think, It's going to formulate some response, and then it's going to actually provide you with that written response. And it's going to provide you with what it thinks is the most appropriate answer to your question or your query. So it is incredibly simple to use. And at this point, you might be asking yourself, well, that's all good, but how does this thing actually work? What is all of this buzz about? Now, I'm going to preface this explanation by saying I'm going to keep this as simple as possible in terms of explaining how it works technically. I'm not a subject matter expert in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and if you really want to understand in more detail the technical architecture and operations of this, there's a ton of literature available online, and I would highly recommend you go straight to the OpenAI website because they have all of that information available. Now, ChatGPT runs on a language model that is called Generative Pre-trained Transformer, thus the acronym GPT. And this model has been trained on massive amounts of information from a bunch of different sources, websites, books, journal articles, and more. Now, ChatGPT uses what's called natural language processing, or NLP, to basically break down inputs such as sentences, phrases, paragraphs into smaller components. Then it analyzes their meaning and it uses that information to generate contextually relevant responses. And that's what really sets it apart from other chatbots. Now, why is it so amazing? Well, it is so amazing because its language model was calibrated or tuned based on human feedback. Now, the process is called reinforcement learning from human feedback. And basically what that means is that human AI trainers worked with the model. They actually provided it with the output of conversations where a person acted as both a user asking questions and the AI assistant providing responses. And that is what allows ChatGPT to provide responses that seem as if they're actually coming from a human. Now, that is all we're going to get into in terms of, again, sort of how it works. And before we actually move into the show me the goods, does ChatGPT have any limitations? And the answer to this question, and it's really important as users that you're aware of these limitations, there are three major limitations. The first one is that ChatGPT was trained on data up to and including September 2021. That means that if you're asking prompts or asking questions about events that took place after that period of time, it may not be able to respond. It doesn't have the information about those events or things that transpired after that period. Now, that's where if you subscribe to the premium version, you will be getting access to new models that feature more timely data. Now, the other two limits, and again, these are really important as users to understand, that it may occasionally, from time to time, provide responses that feature incorrect information. And it can also produce biased responses. Now, the slide has a screenshot that we'll see later in today's session, which is taken right from the interface. So again, we're trying to call your attention to the fact that there are some limitations and you want to be aware of these limitations while you're using it. And without further ado, we're going to move on to the show me the goods section. And again, in this section, what we are going to do is really look at several different use cases. We're going to keep it really simple so that you can learn all of the different ways, or at least some of the different ways that you can leverage this tool. Now, Emily, I just want to confirm that you can see my browser here.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Now, the first thing that you need to do in order to access ChatGPT is you actually need to navigate to it. So in order to access ChatGPT, you want to go to chat.openai.com. You can just Google it, of course. And in this case, it's brought me right into the user interface of the application. Now, I'm not going to be covering how to create an account in this session. You will have to actually set up an account in order to access it. That means putting in your email, generating a password, authenticating your identity with a second factor, et cetera, et cetera. It is a pretty straightforward process. If you do need assistance with that, I do have a tutorial that kind of covers how to do that. Now, before we get into use cases, we'll very quickly talk about general navigation of ChatGPT. Now, there's three main elements to the user interface that you should be aware of. The first one is the sidebar, which is featured on the left here. This is where you can come to initiate new chats and where you can also come to access previous chat threads that you've initiated. You can also access the settings, you can get help, you can log out of your account. Now, the second element of the interface is the send a message prompt or send a message input field. This is where you actually come to type your input, your prompts, your queries. And the last piece is the actual chat pane. And that is this space here where you're actually going to see the responses that ChatGPT has provided. Now, in order to use ChatGPT in terms of basic controls, again, it is predicated on putting in a message or a prompt, as it's sometimes referred to. Now you can see here, I've input this statement that says type 650 random characters. And after I press enter, it is going to respond to this query. And you can see that that's happening in real time. Now, at any point while it's generating a response, if you want it to stop, you can click on the stop generating button and you can see that it's just going to end here and it's going to give this chat thread a name. And if I want it to regenerate a response, I can go ahead and click this button and it's going to do that again. Now, an important note about generating responses, if you've ever asked it to stop and then regenerate a response, and you want to go back and see a previous version of that response, what you can see here is this number that says 2 of 2. That means that I've asked it to generate 2 responses to the same prompt. And if I click on this arrow, it will allow me to kind of go back and look at the earlier version or the earlier response. So that is basic navigation, basic controls. Now we're actually going to get into the good stuff and we're going to look at how you can use this in your day-to-day life. Now, one way that individuals are leveraging ChatGPT is for social content creation. Now, it's really useful for creating social content. That can include things like webinar or event descriptions, social media post descriptions, and so much more. Now, let's say I was hosting a webinar titled Intro to ChatGPT, and I needed help writing a description for that webinar. I might put a prompt in here that says, write a description for a webinar titled Intro to ChatGPT. I'm going to go ahead and press enter. And we're going to see here that it is going to give me a response, and it's kind of broken it down by title, description. You can see here it's going to open with a question. Are you curious about how AI-powered conversational agents work? Then it's going to talk about what's going to be covered during that webinar, etc. So this is a pretty good start. And all I had to do was put a couple of words in, put a sentence in, and have this content created for me. Now, here is a really super important note about ChatGPT. And if you walk away from today's session with one tip, please make sure this is it. And that is that when you're writing ChatGPT prompts, you should always remember that specificity is key. That is, the more specific you are and the more context that you provide in your prompts, the better that response is going to be. Now, to demonstrate this, suppose I put this prompt into the message box here. So here I'm asking it to write a description for a webinar titled Intro to ChatGPT, hosted by Meetup Live. I put in when it's going to take place, who it's hosted by, and I've also stated that this is going to be tailored to individuals who are interested in learning the basics of this tool. Now, I've included topics that will be covered, and I've also asked it to include a pun. So let's go ahead and let's generate the response here. You can see it's going to follow a similar format. Now, no 2 responses will ever be the same. It could have looked completely different, but you can see here it's going to state the date, the time, who it's hosted by, and it's also going to include the information such as what topics will be covered, etc. And you can see right at the end it said, and if that isn't enough, we've got a pun for you. Don't be shy. ChatGPT can help you say hi. Ha ha ha. So again, really important note, the more specific and the more context you provide in your prompts, the better the quality of output, the more accurate your output will be. And we're going to see that throughout today's session as I work through some additional examples. Now, what is another good use case for ChatGPT? Well, one that a lot of individuals may struggle with or sometimes might need some help with is brainstorming. That's another amazing use case for this tool. Now, let's say you're a community builder or you're an event organizer and you're looking for some inspiration with planning a series of meetups around a common interest. Well, maybe you could leverage ChatGPT to help you brainstorm a list of activities or meetup events. So perhaps I am the organizer of a meetup for individuals that are interested in extreme outdoor sports. And I might ask ChatGPT to generate a list of social event ideas for a group of individuals interested in this topic. I'll tell it that the group meets once per month and explores a different outdoor activity each time. Now let's see what it comes up with. Now you can see here, it is going to do exactly what I asked it for. It's going to give me a list of ideas that is tailored to this specific special interest group, outdoor sports, so we can have rock climbing adventures, and it's giving me some additional instructions, whitewater rafting, skydiving, etc. So this is one way you could leverage this to help you kind of brainstorm. Well, what if you were maybe, you organized a book club and you wanted to come up with a list of books for your book club to read? Perhaps your book club is business oriented, and so you might be asking for some suggestions. Now, here's a prompt that we could ask it: generate a list of the top 5 nonfiction business books that were written in the late 1990s that could be shared with a business-oriented book club. Now, if I go ahead and generate this, we would expect to see exactly what's happening here. We're getting a list of books, author, the year that it was published, and it's also providing us with a short description of these books. So I don't even have to go out to Google to find out what these books are about or collect information. It can actually do that in real time for me. Now, this is a good example of the limitation I called out earlier. If you had asked it to provide books that were written after the year 2021, after September 2021, because this version doesn't have access to events that took place after that or information, it may not be able to respond to such a prompt. Now, we've talked about how you can use it to help you write social posts. We've talked about how you can use it to write or to facilitate brainstorming. Now, another good use case, and this is actually something that I personally use it for, is content creation, social media content creation. You could use it to help you plan, organize, etc. Now, suppose I need help coming up with an outline for one of my upcoming YouTube tutorials that I'm working on. I could simply ask ChatGPT for some help. So here I'm saying, help me write an outline for a YouTube tutorial that demonstrates something. And in this case, I've put in some topic that is actually for one of my upcoming tutorials. I'm going to go ahead and click enter. And you can see here, it's going to give me the title of this video. It's actually going to break down my video into sort of sections and give me some content that I could use to help me plan. So you could also leverage ChatGPT for social media planning or really any other type of planning, whether personal or business. Now, all of the examples that we've looked at so far have been geared toward content creation, social media, business. Now, there's a ton of practical applications for this tool that could perhaps help you in your personal life, okay? Now, something that I struggle with personally is meal planning, specifically coming up with ideas of what to eat for dinner in a given week. Now, you wouldn't necessarily think that a tool such as this could help you with that, but maybe my assumption is wrong. So I'm going to go ahead and throw a prompt in here that say, and I'll just delete this here. Prepare a 5-day meal plan that features 3 vegetarian dishes, 1 meat-based dish, and 1 fish-based dish. I'll click enter, and ChatGPT is going to give me exactly that. And you can see here what's really cool is it even took it upon itself to give me ideas for breakfast, lunch, and dinner on each day, even though I didn't ask for that. Okay, so it's able to actually provide additional context that might be useful for you. So this is a good way that you might use it in a personal type context. Now I will click regenerate response, and we'll see what it can come up with here. Now it's going to take the same approach. And again, I would encourage you to click regenerate response, because sometimes you'll actually see that it's able to provide additional information that might be more useful, or it might even present the same information in a slightly different variation. Now I'll go ahead and put the same prompt in. Now this time I'm also going to ask it to include recipes. So maybe I need some assistance with coming up with ideas as to what to eat. And I'd also like the information on how to prepare them. Now you can see here, not only is it providing me with recipes, but it's also going to give me an itemized list of the ingredients for each of the recommendations that it's making. So the reason I wanted to include this example was to just call your attention to the fact that the practical application of this tool is limitless. You should try to use it as much as you can when you're trying to overcome different problems. And you can also use this in your personal and professional life. Now I'll go ahead and click stop generating, and we'll move on. Now, another really good example, and this is a tool, this is one that has kind of become a hot topic, if you will, is using this tool to help you summarize information. Okay, now let's say you're doing research for an essay or a report or a paper, or you want to summarize some other business information. You can supply ChatGPT with a diverse range of information and ask it to synthesize or summarize that information. Now, if there are any students on this call, I'm not encouraging you to use ChatGPT for your homework. Maybe use it as an aid to help you do your homework, but I wouldn't recommend you actually use it to do your homework for you. Now, what I'm going to do is paste a prompt into the box here. Now, in this fictitious example, I was asked to go out and interview some stakeholders, some people who perform a process in a company. Now, I recorded the interview, I generated a transcript, and now I need to turn that information into something clear, something formal, so that I can then use that in a deliverable. So my prompt here says, can you summarize the following interview transcript to outline the steps involved in the process to do something? In this case, it's enter invoices into an accounting or financial system. Okay, and if I scroll down, I'm not going to read the full prompt, but I will give you a second to kind of skim through this. It's basically the description of a conversation that two people had. And what I'll also call your attention to is what I've done is I've included some complete filler in this description. So you can see I've highlighted a sentence here and it says this sentence is completely irrelevant and just filler. So interview transcript, conversation two people had about a specific topic. I've thrown in a bunch of this filler information and I'm now asking ChatGPT to summarize this. Now I'll go ahead and click the send button here. And you can see that it is going to start off by describing what this transcript outlines. It's going to start to summarize, so the current process is deemed inadequate. And it's going to outline at a very summary level the steps in this process. And if you take a second to read this, it didn't actually pick up any of that filler. So it was intelligent enough to know that I've incorporated random text in this excerpt, and it didn't incorporate that from in the output. So again, this is a really practical use case. If you have large volumes of information you're trying to summarize or synthesize, this is a tool that can help you do that. Now, it doesn't just stop at text-based information or qualitative information. Now, let's say that you have quantitative information and you are responsible for analyzing it, and maybe you're struggling, or maybe you need some insights to kind of kickstart that. You can actually put quantitative information in here as well. So I will go ahead and paste another example into the box. And this time, what I've done is I have pasted a prompt in here that says, analyze the following sales data and provide a summary of the findings. And this is just a table that outlines order date, region, representative, the item, the number of units, the cost, and a total. And I will just flash my Excel sheet here. So this is just this tabular data. I've pasted it in the box and I've written a sentence here, and I'll go ahead and click send. You can see it's going to start by describing what this information contains. And then it's going to go on and build me a narrative that actually summarizes the trends that can be found by analyzing this information. So maybe in the current state, I would have had to create some pivot tables, aggregate this data, summarize it, look at trends, and then come up with a narrative. In this case, it was able to take this as an input and then just create this narrative description that perhaps I could use to kickstart my analysis. Okay. Now, really important note, earlier in the session, we talked a little bit about the limitations, and one of those limitations that were, from time to time, it may provide erroneous information. In my testing and in my preparation for this session specifically, this was the example where I saw the greatest number of errors. Specifically, it would often cite facts as being true that were false. So it would cite that the central region, for example, had the highest sales. When I went to validate that, it was incorrect. So I would caution you and suggest that if you're going to be using it, especially for analyzing quantitative information, and you should do this with a lot of the information you're putting through here, you want to make sure you review it thoroughly, validate it before you just leverage it for a specific purpose. All right, now the next series of use cases that we are going to look at in this tutorial involve using ChatGPT to help you with manipulating data. Now, I incorporated this as an example in today's session because this is one that a lot of people have to do in various contexts, whether it's personal or professional. And what we're going to look at specifically is how you can leverage this tool to help you write formulas to manipulate data in Microsoft Excel. Now, I have an Excel spreadsheet here, and I will just maximize this. And this is just a list of contacts. Okay, so you can see I've got a few different columns, and in this case, I've got email address, date of birth, account expiration date. Now, let's say I need to find a way to easily extract the individual's first name from this email address. Well, I could write a formula myself to do that using left, right functions, mid functions, no problem. Maybe I'm good at that, maybe I'm not. Well, you can easily come into ChatGPT and you can ask it for some assistance with this. Now, I'll paste a prompt in here. And this prompt says, write an Excel formula that extracts the first name from an email address where the structure is first name dot last name at example.com. And I'm going to go ahead and send this. And what you can see here is that it is going to generate an Excel formula that I can use to do this. And what's really cool is that it is also going to provide me with an explanation as to how this formula works. So it's not just take this formula, go do what you're looking for. It's actually going to explain how it works, which is super useful in case you need to explain it to somebody else or modify it. Now, what I also want to draw your attention to is in this prompt, I didn't actually tell it where it can find the data that it needs for this formula. And you can see that what it's done is it's saying, assuming this email address is in cell A1, the formula will return this. So it can even make an assumption in order to actually provide a response that addresses the question. Now, I will go ahead and paste in another prompt, and this time I am going to give it the cell value where it can find what it needs. And you can see, again, it's starting off with assuming the email address is in cell B2, it's going to provide it. Now, the reason that I did this is it is important for you to group your questions in similar threads. So if I had a series of formulas that I wanted to ask it for help with, I would want to group those in one thread because it can actually leverage previous prompts in order to help give you more accurate prompts when you're asking it subsequent questions. So you'll notice that up here, it gave me an explanation. I added a follow-up by just giving it the cell value, and it just gave me the formula. It didn't give me the explanation because it's already done that, and it was able to identify that. Now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we will copy this formula and we'll test it out. Now I'm just going to paste it in my workbook here. And click enter. And so at least for one row, it looks good. And if I just apply this down the board and we do a little QA, you can see Jeff. Jeff's name is there. Jane's name is there, et cetera, et cetera. So if you have requirements to manipulate data in Excel, this is a good way you can use it to help you kind of write formulas. Now I'll use another example. Now, let's say I need to determine the age of an individual based on their date of birth. Again, if I need to write an Excel formula for this, I will go ahead and I will ask it a prompt to help me do this. Now you can see here, I've pasted in a prompt that says, write an Excel formula that determines an individual's age based on their date of birth, which is stored in cell E2. Now I'll go ahead and press enter. Now, I'm really glad that this happened because this is another demonstration or illustration rather of the limitations of ChatGPT. Now you'll notice that in my prompt, I actually told it what cell it can find the information that it needs, but it didn't pick up on that. You see here it's saying, assuming the current date is stored in cell A1. So this is good to kind of reinforce that point that from time to time, you may experience some of those limitations that are called out right on the landing page or the user interface. Now, it's interesting that it made this assumption because it is still going to incorporate the cell reference here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and paste this into my formula here. And because of this invalid reference, it didn't work. And so we'll go ahead and we'll paste this in one more time. Now we'll go ahead and try regenerate response, and let's see what it comes up with. Now this is an example of how it might take different approaches. So this time that I've done this, it's actually asking me for a reference to the current date. I don't have that in my spreadsheet, so I'm going to click regenerate response. And you can see here it's now come up with an alternative, and that will likely work, and it won't require me to go manipulate my data. So again, when you're getting responses, especially for these kinds of tasks, test it out and then try to regenerate the response. And because I keep this in the same thread, it's likely to have a better output the second time. Now I will go ahead and test this one out here. And we can see it didn't work. So again, just to call out some of those limitations, I can keep regenerating the response. I can go back and analyze my prompt and figure out if I've given it inaccurate instructions. Now, obviously, in part of preparation for today's session, I tested out these prompts and they all worked. But each time that you run a test with ChatGPT, you might see different results. Now we'll look at one last example, and hopefully this one works. And I will just quickly draw your attention to this last column. So in this case, I have a date type column again called account expiration date. And I have a requirement to determine which quarter this date falls in. Now I can, again, come up with this myself by looking at the date and fill out the spreadsheet. That might be cumbersome or might take an excessive amount of time. Or I can throw a prompt in here that says, write an Excel formula to determine which quarter of the year a date falls in based on the date value stored in my cell reference. And I'm also asking it to express the output in a certain way. Now I'll go ahead and click enter. And you can see here again, it's going to build this response and provide me with an explanation. Now I'll go ahead and I will paste this into my workbook. And we can see here again that this didn't work. Of course, that's always how it goes during demonstrations. Again, I tested these prompts and they worked out. And from time to time, you may see errors. Now, that kind of concludes cases for ChatGPT. Now, what I wanted to call your attention to is different ways that you can actually access ChatGPT. Now, something I didn't mention in the context section, Microsoft established a partnership with the company OpenAI that developed ChatGPT. And as a result of that partnership, what Microsoft is going to be doing is actually incorporating this technology in different platforms, in different products that it offers. Now, you'll notice here that I am using the Microsoft Edge browser. Edge is a competing browser to the more popular Google Chrome. Now, what Microsoft has done through its partnership with OpenAI is it has actually integrated ChatGPT technology directly in the browser, meaning I can access some of these capabilities from my browser without having to actually go to the ChatGPT website. Now you'll notice here this icon that says Bing. If I click on this, you're going to see at the very top of my browser, I have 3 tabs: Chat, Compose, and Insights. Now, right from my browser, I can actually chat with artificial intelligence. I can chat with ChatGPT, similar to going to the platform directly from my browser. So I can paste a prompt in here asking, what is ChatGPT, and press enter. And I'm now able to actually leverage the same functionality, the same capabilities in the same place that I'm doing my work, whether that's email, in meetings, using digital collaboration tools. And you can see here that it's able to provide that response, and it functions a similar way. I can get more relevant responses. I can follow up with additional prompts that it actually suggests right from here.
Luigi,
I'll go on. Yep.
Sorry, I just want to chime in. I think you're freezing a little bit, so I don't know if maybe you could, the Wi-Fi is unstable.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'll turn off my video for a second, see if that helps.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, the other element that I'll demonstrate here in the browser as well is you can also leverage these capabilities to help write. So again, I can go to ChatGPT, the platform directly, or I can start to access some of this in different tools. And from this browser, I can actually ask for some artificial intelligence support with writing a message. So I might write cover letter for a marketing position and click generate draft. Now, before I do that, I can set my tone: professional, casual, enthusiastic, format, email, paragraph, blog post, and I can also set the length. So I'll go ahead and click generate draft. And you can see here right from the browser, it's going to provide me with a response to my question. Now, this is just one of the many places that Microsoft and OpenAI and other companies are starting to leverage or integrate artificial intelligence platforms or technology in solutions. So I'd highly encourage you to stay on top of the latest information and developments about how these tools are making their way into the products and services that you use in your day-to-day. And so that concludes the introduction to ChatGPT. Again, I hope everyone learned something new and discovered something new into this in today's session. Emily, I believe we'll move on to the Q&A section.
Yeah, we're good to go. So I am actually gonna just put your links in the chat so that people can stay in touch with you and continue learning from you. So I am just, and there is Luigi's YouTube channel, his website, LinkedIn, Instagram, and his mailing list. So Luigi, are you still there?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. You could turn on your, yeah. All right, let's see. We got a lot of questions because there's a lot of you guys here today. We'll start with Jeff. He asked, are there any sources, books, videos, etc., that you would recommend for learning the foundation of how to utilize AI effectively?
That is a good question. There's nothing I can think of that that's top of mind in terms of books around artificial intelligence. Again, as I kind of said at the outset, I'm not a subject matter expert on artificial intelligence itself as a technology or machine learning, but I will maybe share some information that could be posted on the event page, Emily, after the fact, some resources that I think would help address that question. Yeah.
And I saw a few other questions too about recording our recap of this event. So yes, there will be one. It will be on our blog page, meetup.com/blog, and we can include some of the additional resources that Luigi's talking about. So Mike asked, is Skynet the other name for ChatGPT, or is it different?
If I understand that one, that's a reference to a movie. Skynet being the artificial intelligence from the film series Terminator. Yeah, there's obviously a lot of different opinions about where we're going with the artificial intelligence technologies out there. Yeah, so I mean, it's really, my personal opinion on that is that artificial intelligence, there's limitless applications. There definitely need to be conversations had about governance and controls around the development and the application of this technology, irrespective of industry or where it's being used, how it's being used. So as much as that was a good reference, and thanks for that, it does warrant or call attention to the need for controls and discussions about how to regulate the development and use of this technology.
There's actually a few of those questions, so I just referencing it. Priyanka asked, is it advisable to have different ChatGPT accounts for different businesses?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it would come down to your use cases. In terms of how the technology works, it is, again, we mentioned that reinforcement learning. So you can separate different businesses into different accounts. I would suggest that you kind of group your interaction with it by topics. So if you're going to be creating a series of threads organized around, Microsoft Teams as an example, something that's of interest to me, I'll maintain all of those queries, prompts in one account, because it's using that reinforcement learning to help provide more tailored responses to you. So that is kind of where there might be some benefit or advantage to splitting out your use of it into topics so that it can kind of leverage queries you've asked in the past to provide more accurate responses in the future.
Katie asks, do you have any tips for spotting when data might be wrong or biased?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't have any practical tips aside from just reviewing the output. The one thing that I tend to do is kind of break my queries up into components or sections. So especially if I'm expecting a long output, I'll try to structure my queries or prompts, give me the first part in one response so I can kind of QA the output and then split the rest of my prompts into, separate questions so I can kind of manage the prompt. Again, manage the responses. Based on my testing, where I experienced the most issues were with the numerical analysis. And if you Google this topic, there's tons of different sources out there on where people see, the most mistakes or the most errors with this technology.
Thank you. There was a few questions around this, and Tiffany specifically asked, how do you export the text that is generated?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'll share my screen here. Now, there's two ways that you can kind of export content. There's the straight copy and paste method, and you'll also see that you can click on this button to kind of go down. Sorry, that's not an export button. When there are code snippets, you'll have a copy and paste icon that appears here. You won't see this for regular text, so that's some limitation. And you do also have in the settings, you have the ability to export your data. Now, based on my testing, what this is going to do is it's actually going to send you an output file that is in a JSON type format, and I can show you. So I've downloaded a copy of all my account data, and you can see here it's given me these files, so conversations.json. This isn't a format that you can just easily open in Microsoft Word or Google Sheets or some other tool. You can open it in Google Sheets and Microsoft Excel, and it will require some manipulation. But this is how you would export your information or download your conversation data. And I believe if you Google it, there are some third-party websites that have been spun up to help you easily extract information from ChatGPT. None of them come to mind in the moment, but again, we could potentially add some of that content to the event page.
Thank you, that's helpful. We got a lot of questions also around, can you ask ChatGPT anything in different languages other than English?
To the best of my knowledge, the prompts have to be in English. And it's a good question. Based on the research I've done, I don't think you can input information in other languages. But someone can fact check me on that. That's a great question.
All right, another one. Will the data that we put into ChatGPT become public, or is it encrypted?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So to the best of my knowledge, the information will not be made public. However, I would highly encourage, if you are planning to use this, that you review the terms and conditions, because it is stated that by any information you put or conversations you have in ChatGPT will be visible and will be stored by OpenAI and could actually be reviewed by individuals as part of that human reinforcement training process. So again, always suggest reviewing the terms and conditions and go into using this knowing that your information will be shared with OpenAI and could actually be read by a human individual as part of the training of the model.
Thank you. Anonymous asked, I have also They have asked ChatGPT to respond in a specific tone, such as humorous, snarky, etc. And it's very fun content. Is there another way to add personality to content?
Yeah, it's a really good point. So, and that kind of comes back to the specificity as key component that I mentioned earlier. So if you do want to ask, if you are looking for responses that are written in a certain tone, the best way to do it is to just spell that out in natural language. So, provide your response in a personal tone or a business tone or a casual tone, incorporate a joke. Expressing your requirement in natural language is the way to get it to generate a response that will be fit for your purpose.
Mm-hmm. Monica asked, if you didn't get a response you were looking for, what are helpful keywords to help frame questions and get a better response?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And there aren't sort of keywords that come to mind or are top of mind. There are different vehicles right now. There's a lot of different literature and posts out there outlining, prompts that tend to yield effective results. Nothing stands to mind. My best approach, the tip that I use is always spell it out as much as you possibly can, provide as much detail. To take it down a level, when you input a prompt, what it's actually doing is it's analyzing the words that were found in your prompt. It's scouring the information it has access to, and it's trying to determine the most likely response that will meet your context and your intent based on word matches. So that's why being super descriptive and putting a lot of information and detail in your prompt is likely to result in a higher quality output.
Mm-hmm. Gretchen asked, how to upload a recorded interview to be summarized? Can you do that?
Yeah, unfortunately with the platform, you can't actually upload files. If you had an interview, you would have to have a transcript of that, and then you could paste the transcript into the send a message box.
Gotcha. Thank you. Bernard asked, is there a limitation on the size of text you can paste?
That is a really good question that I don't know the answer to. I don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head. I can look that up right now.
Well, from what your demos, it seems like you can at least put a decent amount of information in there. So.
Yeah, the number 3,000 stands out on top of mind. So I'm just looking this up. 500 words or 4,000 characters seems to be what the suggested or the limitation is. And again, for anyone that was interested, that tends to be where you get value out of the premium subscription, as you have the expanded limits, increased performance, etc.
Good to know. Thank you. Mary James asks, are you using the paid version of ChatGPT?
I personally am not using the paid version of ChatGPT. I've not tested it either myself. I've just tested out and I've used the free version of the product.
Evie asks, can it correct errors that you point out to it?
Yes. Yeah. So if you are able to identify a discrepancy, again, that is where the value of keeping your threads keeping your topics, your conversations threaded will help the platform, because it is learning. And something that we didn't see in the tutorial, especially when you ask it to regenerate a response, you may from time to time see a thumbs up, thumbs down icon asking you to rate the response that was regenerated for you. And it's encouraged that you actually click those buttons if the responses were better the second or third or fourth time or worse, because that's part of that reinforcement learning. If you rate a response, a regenerated response as being better, then it's going to take that information and incorporate it in its model to provide, again, higher quality output for subsequent responses.
Thank you. Rocco asked, is there a way to print the responses, or do you only copy and paste?
Yeah, to the best of my knowledge, there is no native functionality that allows you to print a thread. You could just leverage your browser's capability to print, or you can just copy and paste the responses into some other place and print from there.
Awesome. Let's see. A lot to look through. Melanie asked, covered that one. Jay asked, have you found a good way to determine if ChatGPT has hallucinated?
I have not, no. There are entire communities online devoted to breaking this technology and kind of exploiting its uses in different ways. I've not done any of that.
Maxine asked, ChatGPT seems to be the most prominent AI tool right now. How does it differ from other AI tools?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think these days, the major competitor that was recently launched to ChatGPT is Google Bard. That's B-A-R-D. So it's meant to be the Google equivalent of this product. I myself have not tested that product. I have read reviews that it hasn't yielded the same results in terms of accuracy of output. And I think, again, that the underlying technology of ChatGPT, what really sets it apart is that reinforcement human training. So that is something that is a differentiator. And again, why part of the reason why there's been a lot of buzz around this solution is that the responses, the ability to simulate human conversation seems to be unprecedented compared to some of the other chatbots that are available in the market.
All right, another question from William. They asked, how do you know when to ask it to regenerate the response and when to give a new prompt?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it comes down to the degree in which the response satisfies what you're looking for. It's always encouraged if you're not satisfied with a response to regenerate as part of that learning. And if you're after regenerating the response, you're still not ending up with an output that it serves purpose, that is fit for purpose, then that's where you might want to go back and try to rephrase the prompt or provide additional information or state it differently.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anonymous asked, when it gives you incorrect information and you continue the conversation, saying that didn't work, is there another way? And will it give you another way which it might actually work?
It won't. You can respond to a prompt that you've determined is insufficient by saying provide an alternative. Again, clicking that regenerate response button is the mechanism for which you can invoke it to identify that it didn't provide a quality response. So you can state it in natural language. I've tested that and I've not seen by doing that I've received sort of the thumbs up, thumbs down. I've only ever received that component or that capability using the regenerated response. And that tends to be the recommended approach so that you can get into that reinforcement learning mechanism.
Someone else asked, does ChatGPT ask clarifying questions when it's told that the response is not acceptable to try generating it differently?
No, to the best of my knowledge, it will not ask you a question. It is sort of one way in terms of it. You ask it a question, it provides a response, and that's kind of the extent of the loop.
Mm-hmm. Terry asked, how did ChatGPT know where your Excel file was?
Yeah, that's a great question. In the examples that I demonstrated, it didn't need to know where the Excel file was. Rather, I was asking it to write me formulas to manipulate data stored within that file. And so my prompts were giving it sort of the cell references to the data that it needed. For example, determine an individual's date of birth based on the date found in this cell.
Gotcha. Thank you. David asks, when it comes to analyzing data tables, do you simply just copy and paste the cells from Excel? You kind of just went into this. You want to analyze. And what about tables off of a website? Do you just copy and paste that into?
Yeah, it's a good question. And unfortunately, at this time, it only accepts text as an input. So yeah, in terms of asking it to analyze quantitative information, you just copy and paste the numerical data into the compose box or the send a message box, and it will analyze those values.
We got a question from Andrew. He asked, where was the button to use ChatGPT in the browser? It glitched at the moment that you showed it.
Oh, sorry, I'll share my screen here. Just want to confirm you can see my screen.
Yep.
Yeah, so this is Microsoft Edge. So if you are not using Microsoft Edge, you want to download the latest version of that. And you can see here at the very top of the screen, the Bing icon. Clicking on this is going to add this pane here where you'll get access to these additional tabs. Chat, where you can chat with the artificial intelligence, similar to using the ChatGPT directly from the OpenAI website. And the compose box is where you can come to generate content or ask the AI here behind the browser to actually generate content for you. So it's clicking on this icon. And again, this kind of capabilities is the result of Microsoft's partnership with OpenAI and incorporating this technology in a lot of the Microsoft products and services.
Thank you. We got time for one last question. Someone asked, can ChatGPT help in pair programming, or how can we simulate GitHub Copilot?
Sorry, I didn't catch the question, Emily.
Can ChatGPT help in pair programming, or how can we simulate GitHub Copilot?
I am not familiar with the concept of pair programming or GitHub Copilot. So yeah, I'll defer that question just because I'm not entirely sure what that is.
Okay, no
Sorry.
Well, thank you so much. That's all we have time for. Unfortunately, I know there's so many questions people still are wondering because this is such a hot topic. But before we go, I will just share one more quick slide. All right, so Meetup is on TikTok, and we'd love to have you all follow us. So please check us out. Our handle is @Meetup, and we post some really fun and engaging content that you won't want to miss out on. And as a reminder, you can do a recap of this event in a few days on our blog, Community Matters blog at meetup.com/blog. So thank you again, Luigi, for doing this with us. I learned a lot. I'm sure everybody else learned so much. And thank you all for being here. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks a lot, Emily. Take care, everyone.
Bye.